It's 5 Drive on 5M. Good afternoon. We've just been talking about this, and we've got somebody to come on the air to help explain it all to us as we continue to move through the weird world that is COVID-19 and adjust to things in real time. Now that the vaccine is a reality in the country, it's interesting to kind of look at some of the legal frameworks and jurisdictions that may or may not inhibit employers and employees, and this is all quite complicated. So on the line to help us now this afternoon, we're going to be chatting to Tertius Wessels, an advocate and legal director at Strata-G Labour Solutions. Good afternoon. How's it?
I'm very well, thanks, Nick, and yourself?
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming onto the show. Look, now that there's a vaccine, the question I suppose is, can companies enforce a vaccine certificate in the workplace? What is this dependent on? Is it a company-to-company thing?
Yeah, so Nick, it is definitely a very interesting question that has come up, and given the lack of any legislation requiring vaccinations, employers need to assess whether or not it would be permissible or even desirable to require employees to be vaccinated. In some instances, may even be potential risk in having to subject employees or making vaccinations almost a mandatory element. If we just start looking at Section 12 of the Constitution, which requires or guarantees everyone the right to bodily integrity. So we have to look at how the law kind of fits into all of this, and especially from a Labour Relations Act perspective as well. If an employer cannot introduce mandatory vaccination policies, they need to rather consider whether or not it's not permissible to rather encourage employees to become vaccinated, so that the encouragement does not violate any of an employee's other rights that they may have in terms of the Constitution.
So simply put, I mean, if a company were to enforce this, would they then be responsible for assisting employees in receiving the vaccine?
Yes, I think there is an obligation on employers, those that would want to require employees to subject themselves for vaccination, to at least assist the employees in obtaining that vaccination. The real question is really, though, what to do in those circumstances where an employee refuses to undergo or receive a vaccination for any religious beliefs, etc., and how the employer then deals with those employees as such, because we still know that there are other precautionary measures that employers can enforce to ensure that both employees, customers, and everybody are able to enter a safe working environment.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you know, as you'd mentioned, there is the right to bodily integrity that's enshrined in our Constitution, but so are a myriad of other things that may preclude people from their want to take the vaccine. But I mean, would that just not play out like any labour relations matter would with regards to one's personal rights and etc.?
Yes, it would. But we also have to understand that often the employees that have taken up employment with a particular employer already have done so knowing exactly what they are in for, so to speak, when they had made application for employment and they were appointed. And a lot of times, not many of the general rules, policies and practices in organizations are discriminatory of nature, because it's solely based on good discipline and the maintenance of good order in the workplace. And now you've got this element that's coming into place where a person has always been able to render their services without a vaccine. So how reasonable does it now become to impose the vaccination as a mandatory requirement?
I suppose from a legal perspective, we can just hope that this is all done transparently, because there's so many moving parts. I mean, that's the key really, isn't it, as all this gets figured out?
Exactly. This is not a means, I think, from an employer's perspective, if they want to make it mandatory, to try and get rid of anybody, so to speak. There is just this amount of people that are passing away as a result of COVID or COVID-related illnesses, and protecting employees, protecting the workplace, it's becoming increasingly more important. Employees must also not forget, that in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, we as employees ourselves have a responsibility to ensure a safe working environment at the end of the day. And we all need to play our part, I believe, if we want to curb the spread of COVID-19 in the workplace, because if somebody gets infected within the workplace, the repercussions are significant. Businesses are forced to close down, disinfect, and that all has an impact on operations at the end of the day.
I agree. It's Tertius Wessels, advocate and legal director of Strata-G.